So James, you just dropped a big story.
Yes, sir.
Not as big as a Jeffrey Toobin thing, but you know.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yes.
Depends upon how big that is.
Before we go in,
Oh my gosh,
James. For anyone that doesn't know, you run Project Veritas.
I run Project Veritas. We're the nation's premier, perhaps the nation's only undercover or even investigative reporting organization. We use video, incontrovertible video evidence, and we just launched a story an hour ago on Google, a Google engineer discussing how the algorithms are skewed to favor Joe Biden in the presidential election.
But instead of reading through what your website says, you're here, you can tell us, but I'll read the headline. Senior Google manager on search engine's power. You are just plain and simple trying to play God. The power's in the search. Trump says something, misinformation. You're going to delete. If a Democratic leader says that, then you're going to leave it. So how about you just tell us what's going on? What's this breaking story?
Well, this is a guy, Ritesh Lakhar, technical program manager at Google, and he works for the cloud, and he's talking about he's kind of an unwitting whistleblower. He talks about how the corporation plays God, and I'm reading here, like if it was fraud, it doesn't matter, but for Trump or for Melania, it matters. On the other side, Trump says something, misinformation, you're going to delete that because it's illegal or whatever pretext. He talks about the double standard. It's something we all suspect to be true, but if he says if a Democratic leader says that, then you're just going to leave it. And he talks about how the corporation Google is outsourcing jobs in order to spy on Americans, and he feels guilty about this. And he describes the algorithm, how people cry in the corridors of Google when Trump won. So a lot of what Veritas does is confirm suspicions, right? None of this is surprising to you, but it may be one of the first times you've ever heard them say it as a current employee. That's why we use hidden cameras. People are more honest. Sometimes the newsworthiness is such that people talk about the ethics of recording maybe a good man saying this, but the public's right to know is paramount. It's important that we show this information to the masses.
I love the irony of you literally exposing manipulation, interference, and censorship, and then they censor you. It's the perfect, I always say this, the best way to describe irony, to define irony, is a fire truck on fire. You're exposing these big tech companies, and they're actively shutting you down in real time.
We have a saying at Project Veritas, content is king, right? So, you just got to do the good work. You got to expose it. You got to put it out there. Get proxies to put it out there. We embargo clips with people ahead of time. Sometimes I do that with you, Tim. I'll share a little link.
It's true.
And that's why the New York Times called it a misinformation campaign, because we were embargoing clips with people ahead of time, which is what reporters always do.
Yep.
But that's why I brought this book with me, 1984. If you haven't read it since you were 15, reread the book, listen to it on Audible, whatever you do.
We have Jennifer Scott says, I love your work, but it seems like nothing ever changes. We never see criminal charges like in the case of Omar, or people losing their jobs like in the case of what happened in Denver. So I have to ask myself and you, what's the point?
This is that cynicism, that hopelessness that is so pervasive and is toxic. The journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step, and the price of liberty is eternal vigilance. Everyone needs to think bigger for a second.
Yes.
Like, stop. I'm tired. I'm just going to speak to the person right into. Is that the camera right there?
Yeah, it's the camera. That is
Stop.
you.
Stop. Can I say? Stop whining. Stop bitching.
Yes.
Stop complaining. Think big for a second. Think big. Imagine if someone had the stones at the FBI. Now, there are two types of courage to fight a war, to quote von Clausewitz, military philosopher. There's the courage to march up a hill with a bayonet and to take the hill. Okay, that's physical courage. And then there's a more rare or an equally amazing form of courage, which is moral courage. And just imagine if someone at that Bureau of Investigation in D.C. wore one of those little hidden cameras and recorded Comey and recorded Christopher Wray. Can you imagine the difference that would make?
With all of the exposés you've done on Google so far, give us the big picture of what's happening with Google, with Facebook, with Twitter, from this story to the other stories you've done.
The big one was Jen Janai saying we need to have algorithmic fairness.
Yeah.
Because God forbid you Google search something and you get reality or facts. So what if the facts are unfair? So what we have to do is censor the reality such that it makes the world more fair. Who defines fair? We don't know. And then Jen Janai says, we got to prevent the next Trump situation. It's becoming more obvious. It's becoming more clear that there is no shame on these platforms. But I still believe fundamentally that people are intelligent enough to be receptive to real and raw information like you're seeing with Project Veritas. And what's more, Tim, is, and I can't emphasize this enough for your show, Veritas's vision is insiders and whistleblowers coming public, brave people. That's why our motto is "Be brave, do something." And I was telling my staff that Ernest Hemingway once said, "What is moral is what you feel good after, and what is immoral is what you feel bad after." Morally defensible journalism is rarely what you feel good about afterward. It is only that which makes you feel better than you would otherwise. So it's like eating coal in the forest to help your stomach. It never feels good, but you feel better after you do it. Undercover work is tough. People don't like it. It's like you're filming someone without them knowing. Sometimes they're good people, sometimes they're bad people. In this case, this guy is probably some combination of somewhere in between.
Right.
But the public's right to know is paramount.
At a certain point, if you know what you're doing is destroying something, someone, society, and you're like, well, I'm not going to stick my neck out. I mean, that's kind of messed up.
Yeah, and there's no other option. It's a choiceless choice to do this work because people are not going to speak on the record. Nobody will ever do that. I mean,
some people
well,
do.
Once in a while. I mean, you had the Eric Cochran, our colleague at Pinterest, was making a ton of money, and he gave it all up. And he said, I don't, what am I going to do? But he ashes to ashes one day and go to the grave, and I'm young and want to do this. I hope to find more of these people. We have a tip line, Veritas, that's Veritas, tips at protonmail.com for those of you watching, if you want to be brave and do something. And
Yeah.
so there's a lot of options.
Clearly not everybody at Google is a zealot who wants to manipulate people and control the world, thinking their ideology is legit. This guy clearly doesn't. He thinks they're playing God and there's something wrong with what they're doing. It's unethical. But why wouldn't he just actually come out and give that statement, put out that video and say, hey, guys, this is happening? Why? Like, what do people not care about the legacy that they leave behind?
There's this tiny fraction of people who, I mean, this guy, Zach Voorhees, another one I didn't mention at Google, algorithmic unfairness. Zach leaked the document out of Google, and he was terminated by Google. And he said, quote, "This was an act of atonement, an attempt to make my conscience clear."
You guys have been accused of being, partisan conservative and going after left-wing organizations and trying to smear them or whatever. So
well, I mean, there's a lot of examples to the contrary. I mean, we went after the Republican Attorney General of New Hampshire recently because his deputy said that there was no such thing as voter ID in the state, and I confronted Gordon McDonald, who is a Republican, who works for Chris Sununu, who is a Republican. There are examples in Amy Robach, the Jeffrey Epstein video. That wasn't conservative or liberal. That was actually plotted by liberals, and suddenly the New Republic was like, is James O'Keefe legitimate now? So they actually have a headline that said that. It's like the moment I go after like the NRA, we live in a world not of angels but angles, where people don't talk about. They don't ever think that our motives are pure. There must be and not everything's political. If someone comes to me, Republicans ripping up ballots, I will air that video. I swear to God, if someone gives me a video of Republican congressmen,
Do it.
I'm publishing the video.
So anyway, what I was getting to in terms of the bias accusations against you, what I really love about this was when you're publishing Google.
Yes.
Is Google a left-wing institution now? When they say that you're targeting liberal organizations or leftists, they're almost admitting
that's true.
that these big tech companies are.
They
or
are.
the newspapers are.
The Democrat media complex. I think Ritesh Lakar tonight, we're going to have more videos tomorrow, and he does say that they lean that way. And it appears to be, Tim, the case that they are partisan institutions. And some of the evidence in these tapes, you'll see one tomorrow, which it might even trigger an FEC complaint. That people watching this there are insiders that are reaching out to our encrypted Proton mail address right now.
Already.
We put out this Minnesota video, and it's got this guy in the car with all the ballots. And this was recorded on his Snapchat. I did not secretly record him. Now you may ask, how did I? This is a private Snapchat that one of my sources obtained. So he posted it to an individual or two, and that person sent it to me. It has a timestamp on the Snapchat. It says July 2nd. So we didn't even record this, Tim. It was recorded by himself, in his car, with many, many, many absentee ballots. It's illegal in Minnesota to have more than 3. We put this out, all these clips of people saying we're breaking the law, we don't care, all these Somalis doing cash transactions for ballots. It's all on the tape. And the New York Times puts out an article, Tim, 2 hours before the presidential debate, because I'm pretty sure Trump was going to mention this. He's talking about fraud, ballot fraud. And it says, videos are part of a coordinated disinformation campaign, experts say. Who are these experts?
Who are the experts?
Stanford University researchers who they paid. So what's interesting about this, and this is something that, again, going back to the Soviet Union, they tend to project onto me that which they are. They are the thing that they hate, and they accuse me of doing the thing that they do. And they do it first, and they do it well. And it's an incredibly effective Machiavellian tactic. So they come out and say it's a coordinated disinformation campaign when that's precisely what the New York Times is doing. Anyways, here's what happens. We put a video out. USA Today quotes the New York Times. Facebook views USA Today as credible and sends a notification out to every single person who has ever shared that Minnesota video. I got texts from everyone in the country. James, Facebook just told me you're fake news. And I think we've got, my attorney says, and I don't want to be in the litigation business, Tim, because there's only so many people I can sue. My general counsel told me today, he's like, what about suing Facebook? We've been sued over a dozen times. We've won 8 straight lawsuits. Why? Because I'll take it all the way to the Supreme Court. And at the end of the day, I'm in the right. The facts and the law are on our side.
Have you ever deceptively edited a video for any reason?
No. We've done hundreds of investigations, and I will list right here, right now, the specific things that they talk about, like mistakes I've made, if you want to call them that. In the Acorn investigation, which is the one most of my critics will bring up, they'll say he didn't wear the pimp costume in the video. But pimp protocol doesn't require the wearing of a coat to be a pimp. So the second example they used, we were talking about this last night, was in the NPR video in 2011. That was 9 years ago. There was one scene where Ron Schiller, the vice president of National Public Radio, tells someone he thinks is a Muslim fundamentalist. He's kind of quoting somebody else, but mid-sentence it becomes his own thought. So an editorial decision was made in the timeline to create an to cut when he went mid-sentence. That's it. The video was 12 minutes long. It was one part. And the way the media works is they yammer about this one specific editorial decision. I don't think it was a material edit, Tim. So what you begin to realize when you open your eyes is it's worse than we can it's worse than 1984. As Gavin McGinnis says, it's become almost a Kafkaesque nightmare. It's no longer Orwellian. It's just this pathologically insane double standard. And the only solution is to just keep moving forward. You just have to keep putting out the work.
I want to talk about how the media plays this. There's a really funny phenomenon in news about how journalism fact checks itself. There's an inherent bias that the New York Times is credible. The Washington Post is credible. So from that standpoint, they'll start using the New York Times and the Washington Post as a gauge of whether or not another organization is credible, creating this bias feedback loop.
Yes, feedback loop is right.
So James, do you think that Andrew Breitbart would be proud of what you've done?
I hope so. I mean, Andrew Breitbart was someone who is very much him and I were very different people in many respects, very different. But I talked to him every day, and what he would do is understand how, he would tweet 1,000 times a day. He was very aggressively in the weeds on everything and fighting every battle. Probably why he died so young, 42, 43. And we were very much aligned in that way. And when he died, nature abhors a vacuum. Nobody has quite filled his shoes.
I think it's you.
Many others have filled it. But, I think so. I wonder what life would be like and what the world would be like if he never died.
Donut says, I'm working for FB. Light it up, James. It's about time. Tired of internal comms from Zuck about how to listen, soul searching, BLM on every poster, and internal tools for coding.
Oh, snap.
So what that person needs to do is email Veritas tips, Veritas tips at ProtonMail, Veritas tips at Proton. Email Veritas tips at ProtonMail.com, please. And you can use an encrypted deal. You can have a secret account, a phone number, burner phone, whatever you need to do.
We think we fight evil people, but we forget the line between good and evil cuts through the heart of everyone.
That is amazing. That's my favorite. Who said that?
So this is Daniel Bundrick. He said, let me read the full thing for you.
Yeah.
We think we fight evil people, but we forget the line between good and evil cuts through the heart of everyone.
Wow.
Blowing the whistle means calling attention to the evil that crawls out of you as well.
That's a Solzhenitsyn line from Gulag Archipelago.
Yes.
The line that separates good and evil runs through every human heart. Perhaps the most profound thing said in the 20th century.
In a YouTube comment.
And we all have this line. Every one of us. Veritas tips at Proton Mail.
Yeah.
Veritas tips at. Okay.
What are your other?
Be brave.
What are your other social links?
What do you mean?
Where,
where
your
people follow you.
Yeah,
website,
people follow you.
ProjectVeritas.com, Twitter. It's James O'Keefe III. That's James O'Keefe, capital III. at Twitter. You can follow us there.
But seriously, again, James, thanks for coming on, and
Thank you.
Come back anytime. Everybody else, we'll be live tomorrow at 8 p.m. And again, smash the like button, and we'll
Yes.
see you all tomorrow.